Hi, I'm Laura, and we are going to be talking about the future of Spotify. And I'm also joined here with Yemi and Jonas.
So just a recap of the case. We're wondering why Spotify is struggling as a company. Their revenue isn't enough to cover all of their fixed costs, so they're not really making a profit every year. This could be due to the investments that the CEO said that he was making in order for the future of Spotify to be guaranteed. But this could also be a problem with the industry of streaming companies or even just the business model that Spotify follows. So the first thing we looked at was Porter's five forces, which are low buyer power, low supplier power, high barriers, no substitutes, and no rivalry. And basically, if these five criteria are fulfilled, or the more criteria are fulfilled, the better the industry is that you're looking to join, the more profit that you could probably make in that industry. So, um, next slide. Looking at the supplier power in the streaming industry, supplier power seems to be higher than buyer power, just because um, the rarity of viable record companies. So there are many people that could be supplying products to Spotify, but they are making most of their money off of the big companies, the ones with the popular producers and singers. And there are a lot of those companies, but the actual products that they make are rare and can't be copied as well. And then with buyer power is also high because the record companies need the streamers to make money. Otherwise, companies would have to rely on concerts, which isn't something you can be scheduling on a daily basis. But buyers are not concentrated because there are many companies like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and so that means that if a supplier really needed to shut down one avenue that they are selling their records to, it's possible, and that makes buyer power slightly lower than supplier power, which is not what you want really in an industry. And then the next two forces are substitutes and competition. So one of the biggest weak spots of the industry is that there are many substitutes for the product, which are the songs. Um, Although songs are unique and they can't be recreated, there are so many different ways to make a song, as well as so many different ways to stream a song. Um, and that makes for very high competition because there are a large number of firms that produce the same product, and there are high fixed costs for getting the royalties to songs, and it's a slow industry growth, which is why the CEO is saying that it'll probably take years for Spotify to hit its break even point because there's so many high fixed costs that they are paying for, and yet they are not breaking even because it takes a long time for revenue to actually hit that point. And then the last fours are barriers. So this is one of the good parts, I'd say, of the streaming industry is there aren't too many like high barriers, but there are plenty of them. So like royalties and rights, although anybody could start a streaming company and they could allow for people to post their own music on there, it's not going to make them enough money because you get most of your money from the bigger companies. And so access to those companies include paying royalties, paying for the rights to the songs. And no big company is going to just sell the rights to their songs to a smaller company. So this is why Spotify and all the bigger companies have created kind of a high barrier because they've been in the business so long that the record companies trust them to make a profit with their songs. And then this also includes access to the larger companies and singers. Access to podcasts as well is one of Spotify's strong suits because, unlike with the bigger companies, podcasts aren't really owned by a bigger company. They're the individual people that are selling or allowing their podcasts to be on the app. And so access to so many high quality podcasts that people will actually listen to is pretty rare. And then also a loyal consumer base, because as much as you can have as much music as you want on your app, if you don't have people that are continuously coming back and paying a subscription or coming back and listening to the music over and over again, you won't be making much money.
So in trying to answer the question of whether Spotify can have a sustainable competitive advantage, it's important to look at a few things. So Spotify does possess some qualities that could lead to the assumption that it's possible for it to have a sustained competitive advantage. A few of these qualities would be the consumer base and brand recognition. So like as shown in the case, Spotify is a huge music streaming in company, and it has a very large consumer base, and it offers things that some other companies don't. So it offers things like a family plan where you can have up to 6 people listening on one plan. It offers a free version, which many others don't offer. It's very easy to use. Um, and it's the brand recognition, it's very recognizable for both listeners and for artists wanting to share their music, and it's easy for artists to share their music. um and as Yemi mentioned, it offers things like podcasts, other sorts of things that other companies don't. Next slide. So Spotify, using this picture right here, the VRIO chart, we can try and answer whether Spotify can have a sustainable competitive advantage. And almost immediately, you can see that it sort of can't, because Spotify is not rare, as has been proven by Apple Music and other music streaming companies, because they are both imitatable and um, not rare. So since its launch, it's had competitors, and while it does offer some specialities that other competitors might not, uh, that can't last, because eventually another competitor could just offer those same things. If so, like if the specialities that Spotify offered were really putting it at a true competitive advantage, then it wouldn't be hard for its competitors to emulate that. Um, in the short run, Spotify cannot have a sustained competitive advantage because it's just too easy to emulate, and it's not rare enough. But if you in the case, the CEO of Spotify says this quote here: "We're building a business for the long term, and if you believe in the strategy, then just stick with us because it's going to be really successful." So they're kind of reliant on the fact that they're building a company that will be more successful in the long run. And if this is true, Spotify could have a sustainable competitive advantage in the future. But at this moment, they can't, just based on this resource view strategy, because it's neither rare or costly to imitate.
So when comparing Spotify to its competitors, as we said, it definitely has some upsides. One being that Spotify has a very advanced algorithm in comparison to Tidal and Apple Music. Um, Spotify curates playlists that are curated exactly for like time of day per user, and uses metadata and a bunch of user data, as well as like analyzing the mode, chord progression, and genre of music that you mostly listen to recommend songs. And this has drawn a lot of people to want to use Spotify, because their algorithm is also it's not widely understood how it works, so it's also a little bit difficult to replicate because it's not widely known how it works. But that doesn't mean that in the future people won't come up with a better algorithm. Also, Spotify's unique because of social sharing. There's a big social media aspect to Spotify. You can see other people that you follow, like what they're listening to on the right-hand corner of your screen on a laptop or desktop. You can follow your friends. You can see what playlists they've curated. And that is a really big selling point, especially with younger generations who are, on Instagram, on Twitter, wanting to connect with their friends and have that social aspect to music listening. But one really unfortunate thing about Spotify is their royalties. So per stream on average, they give artists slash record companies 0.003 to 0.005 cents per stream, which is the least amount per stream out of their competitors right now. And that is not a good look, especially for people who want to subscribe to a service that values artists and uh, supplying people with the correct amount of money for their work. Also, Spotify doesn't have a high fidelity feature, which they originally promised a few years back in 2021. They never followed through on that, and that's a really big selling point for audiophile listeners who really care about high quality audio. And then, as Jonas said, yes, Spotify does have podcasts, but recently they spent like a very large amount of money on having exclusive podcasts that didn't end up helping their company profit very much. So that was not a great, that didn't really attract many customers per se. And then Wrapped is something that Spotify has innovated, basically a rundown of all of your most listened to artists and your most listened to songs that you get displayed to you in a fun little graphic at the end of every year, which is also a great PR strategy that Apple Music actually copied. So Spotify, like when looking at it from a holistic view, seems pretty cool if you're just an average music listener. Um, and here's some examples of those features that I was just speaking about, like the daylist feature, the friend activity, and also enhancing your playlist, allowing Spotify to give you recommended songs based on the songs that you already have in a playlist. But when it comes down to what makes Spotify special, it really just comes down to what you look for in a streaming service. But what's cool about Spotify is that they really are innovators and they've come up with a lot of um uh different things on their platform that a bunch of people have been trying to replicate, which is cool, but it also doesn't mean that that necessarily will make Spotify a profitable company in the long run. So other than their highly advanced algorithm, their easily replicable features uh, make Spotify not the most outstanding competitor, since it's also not a profitable business right now. So yeah, that is our project, and thank you so much for listening.